Okay, so let me preface this video with the title of what you see on screen right now. And it's Bombshell Russia and Maga helping Alberta separatists and Ford authoritarian. So it's Laura Babcock's show. You've got Keith Leslie, spent 36 years covering the provincial Ontario legislature, retired. Then you have Mark Cripps, bachelor's degree in journalism, and spent 8 years as director of communications for Ontario Municipal Affairs, Housing, and Agriculture. So how do I fit into this picture? Well, I fit into this picture because of the Bombshell Russia and Maga helping Alberta separatists. And you'll say, well, how is that possible? Well, number one, I was married to the daughter of the patriarch, 2 generations removed from the East India Company. They had a military larger than the British military under Queen Victoria, ruled Britannica, the British Empire, and then came the American Empire. So MAGA under Trump. So my father-in-law, I got targeted in 1996 because of what I knew, due to the going to Russia in 1990 by a Rosedale lawyer to work with a guy by the name of Boris Yeltsin to undermine Gorbachev, to help with the dissolution of the USSR so that they could launder money, put a guy like Putin and oligarchs in power. There's a need for a lawyer to create a good framework for the oligarchs. Plus, the event I'm describing led to the Panama Papers, the Pandora Papers, and the Paradise Papers, where David Cameron, UK Prime Minister, had to resign. So that's my involvement. So I'm going to explain in further detail what has happened, because, got to understand Donald Trump. The guy's a functioning illiterate, a 12-year-old in a man's body. He gets used by everybody. He's a tool to be used, and he was used by my father-in-law in order to launder money for drug cartels, which Trump was knowingly a part of. He set up Trump to be able to get all these overrides because Trump was a good salesman, and they used him as a front man. They couldn't have him take over the operations because he wanted to do it, but they had too much money they had to launder, and Trump was just getting in the way. He had to just get these agreements where he's trademark. He's the guy of the show. He's branding Trump. And that's what happened. This is how Trump got involved with the Russians. It's always because of money, because Trump lives an ostentatious lifestyle, constantly needs money because he goes for money and puts him in a state of constant bankruptcy. And what better way to have a cash cow is run the United States of America. And there's a lot of people that want to put the Trump tool, because he is a tool, manipulate him for their benefit, but Trump's benefit is just money. So before I digress even further, let's get into what we're really here for. And let's move to my next screen right now. Okay, so now what you need to understand is why we're going to this next screen, and it's going to be Elon Musk and Doge, and how Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, they'd only found 0.006% inefficiencies, but you're going to have conservatives in Canada, Republicans in the U.S. saying government waste is just the swamp. We got to drain the swamp. But really, you're going to find out when you look at it closely, the real waste is real small. It's minimal. And it was 0.006% in the U.S. And the U.S. situation is 10 times worse than the Canadian situation. So imagine the savings you're going to make in Canada if it's 10 times less than 0.006%. But anyways, Elon Musk and Doge, they hacked into the America's Social Security data. And because of the judicial system in the United States, Supreme Court of the United States being overtaken by Republicans, Federalist organization, had a lot to do with it, but they allowed this to happen. Now you can see for yourself. This is how it started, and we'll tie it in with Alberta and Canada.
On a Friday afternoon in June of last year, the Roberts Court issued a shadow docket ruling that handed all of Americans' Social Security data to Elon Musk's Doge. I want to start by just reading an excerpt from the dissent in that case, which acknowledged what an assault this was on the American people. Justice Jackson led that dissent. And she wrote that today the court grants emergency relief that allows the Social Security Administration to hand Doge staffers the highly sensitive data of millions of Americans. The government wants to give Doge unfettered access to this personal, non-anonymized information right now before the courts have time to assess whether Doge's access is lawful. And that's what the court did. Handed over the data to Doge. And subsequently, there has been reporting, whistleblower allegations about the theft of that data by Doge staffers, private actors with...
Okay. So this is the point I want to make. Now, furthermore to that, with this data that's been breached, it's been used to create statistical use to gerrymander and set up redistricting in the United States to favor Republicans. And now we've got a situation where Alberta all of a sudden did a deal with Donald Trump to restore part of the Keystone Pipeline. And then you've got a huge data breach of data, the voters' data, in Alberta. And the UCP, which is the party of Daniel Smith, knew everything about it. So let's move to the next screen here. Okay, so here we have UCP, and we want to know, and here's the byline here, how many people accessed leaked voter list? An analyst here at Alberta Primetime.
From blowback to the voters list data breach, the uncertain future of the snowbirds, the role of golf in green spaces, and the likelihood of landing a PWHL team. Our Primetime This Week panel is in. And joining us this evening, Danielle Paradis, a freelance writer and associate professor of journalism at MacEwan University, and Carissa Halton, writer and strategic planner. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with a prominent Albertan speaking out over the electors list leak. Former Premier Jason Kenney is speaking out after learning his personal information was searched and accessed by the separatist Centurion Project through an app demonstration during one of its April online meetings.
I'll be blunt. I hope that there are serious consequences for those responsible and those involved. I think a lot of these separatist organizations have been playing fast and loose with the rules for far too long, getting away with too much.
Elections Alberta confirms at least 23 people were given full copies of the electors list, and another 545 accessed it through an online tool. The UCP government has so far ignored calls for a public inquiry.
I think we have to be very cognizant that we have to allow the RCMP, working with other law enforcement, Elections Alberta, to do their job.
The leak has also sparked new conversations around groups like the Republican Party of Alberta receiving voter information.
Maybe if you're going to get access to the full voter list, you should have to put down a good behavior bond, $1 million or something.
Alberta's Privacy Commissioner will now also be investigating the leak. Danielle, there's no way getting around this. This has been the dominant story of the week, and doesn't appear to be any sign of it slowing down anytime soon. So what do you feel it will take to get control of the situation such that Albertans will have confidence in the overall system?
Well, unfortunately, some things just are not fixable, and this horse is out of the barn. So there is no way to pull back information. And although we have an idea of how many people had access to the database, that doesn't mean that we have an idea on how many people have actually accessed the information or could have access to the voter list. So it's a long way back to restoring confidence. There's a lot of people who are worked up about this one. You know, this is one of those stories that's penetrated. It's not just political nerds paying attention, it's the whole province. And I just don't see how it's fixable.
Carissa, what do you see then resting on the shoulders of the Smith government in getting control of the situation, containing the scandal, as it were?
Well, I mean, I think they really have to show that they have had no interest or involvement in the release of Albertans' private information. I think they need to distance themselves from groups like the Centurion Project that obviously play really fast and loose with the law, as Kenny says. Well, we know it was not the UCP's list that Centurion was using. It, it was the Republican Party. I think they have a real perception problem, and it's brought on by lingering questions related to this government's possible support of separation. I mean, these questions linger because we know that at least one UCP caucus staffer was at the April meeting where Kenny's information was used as an example. And, these questions also linger because Centurion's leader was the leader of Take Back Alberta, whose organizing helped sweep Kenny out and Premier Smith in. So it's very possible that the staffer was there to simply monitor and report back on the group's activity.
Talk about a conflict of interest. Holy moly. It just gets deeper and bigger, and people don't realize the Conservative Party and you got to understand, where did Pierre Poilievre get his seat from? Alberta. What's he said about this situation here now? Crickets make more noise than Pierre Poilievre, which is really unusual because normally Pierre Poilievre's got something to say about everything. But here, when it involves the United States, when it involves Russia manipulating the people of Alberta, that's really what's going on, folks. Whenever I do a video where I mentioned Daniel Smith in Alberta, I always had this one Russian propagandist responding. He stopped a couple months ago because I ferreted him out, called him out, and he admitted it, and we haven't heard from him since. He used an alias of a roofer in Edmonton, and this is what you need to realize. Now let's move to our next screen. Here you see caucus staff of the UCP, United Conservative Caucus, regularly attend events of political interest, including the meeting in question. So they knew about this data breach. They were part of it. As I said, crickets. The organizer of this meeting were adamant that the data being used was obtained legally. At the time, the staff of the UCP party, Daniel Smith's party, observing the meeting, had no reason to believe the website in question was unlawful. This is how they whitewash things. Now, Shanna Schulhauser, director of communications for the United Conservative Caucus, made the above assertions. So there you go. Let's see what else they have to say.
This meeting were adamant that the data being used was obtained legally. At the time, the staff observing the meeting had no reason to believe the website in question was unlawful. The NDP says the personal information of former Premier Jason Kenney was on display at the meeting. Sarah, how do you see participation of UCP officials or staff, as referenced there in the caucus statement? How do you see that changing the dynamics of this whole conversation?
This is really concerning to me as an Albertan and as an occasional political operative myself, and as someone who really cares about what this actually means in terms of how we safeguard our democracy here in this province. The fact that there were UCP staff members on that call, I have a few different issues with it. First of all, that that if they were there, that they weren't doing the best due diligence that they should have been doing. That no one sounded an alarm bell, but also the fact that they're just even in that meeting with the people running the Centurion project, to me is also super concerning because what interests do they have? Who are they representing? Are they representing government? Are they representing caucus? Are they representing the party? Why is there no firewall between these groups and government. If you want to take part in the Centurion project, then you should go and do that on your own time. The fact that there's this like swinging door, revolving door between these two, like between the government of Alberta and these really serious groups that seek to undermine, in my opinion, democracy in Alberta is like, it's just
Undermine democracy, they want to take the land. Instead of saying, listen, I'm not happy with Alberta and leaving, they want to say, I'm not happy with Alberta and take the land of Alberta with them. Come on, folks. When are you going to start waking up?
fire alarms going off constantly.
Tyler, let me pick up a little bit there on what Sarah was saying and ask, what does it say that the UCP would have an awareness of these Centurion Project virtual meetings such that they would be compelled to log on and check things out?
I guess for me, it's two things. You can speculate why they were there, and if it was access to government, obviously a misuse of the resources. But at the same time, just because you're a staffer of the government doesn't mean that you're not allowed to have your own interest in something as well. I think it speaks to whether or not there is a push or a mandate from the provincial government into furthering the work that's being done, or are these individuals who are either interested in what's being said and want more information, or are they able to have a better understanding of what's going on? So without speculating and assuming that they were doing dirty work on behalf of the government, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that a proper investigation is done, whether or not the information was obtained legally or not, and what the individuals were doing there. But the same question could be asked if regular Joe citizen is attending the meeting too. Do we have to question their motivation in being there? So I think we've got way more questions than answers right now, and that's what's important to focus.
Well, that's really nice. I'm glad you whitewashed that so well there, sir. But here's the deal. What is a voter roll, which is an electoral property of the government, being put into the public domain? You have a separation issue going on now, and it's been actually supported by Danielle Smith and her UCP government. How do you get a separate Alberta within a Canada? Like, this is the UCP mandate. We can have a separate Alberta within Canada. Like, come on now. Not happy with Alberta? You can move south to Montana, but it doesn't mean you can carve out the land of Alberta, take away the indigenous rights that were there prior to any province being incorporated or a federal incorporation, and discard any agreements that were made to create confederation. Alberta came into confederation much later. So now I'm going to move to another screen. I should have moved to another screen, but now I'm going to move to another screen. So sit tight. We're going to take this, we're going to go a little deeper here. So here we have the screen of the overview of what Doug Ford, Conservative Premier of Ontario, did. Mr. Captain Canada, he wants to take on Trump and say, I'm going to cut off the electricity. Trump says, you're going to do that? I'm going to do this. And guess what? Ford backed down. He just finally found another conservative that had a bigger club than him. So that put Ford in check, but that hasn't stopped Doug Ford. Don't think for a second Doug Ford does not have authoritarian ambitions. I knew his brother, Rob Ford. Doug's been riding off Rob's coattails ever since the municipal elections in Toronto. I met Rob Ford many times. I was working on a recycling program. I had a huge plant, hydrogen peroxide plant in Oakville. So I met Rob Ford many times. Rob Ford is not a guy that had a great vision, but he was good at taking care of your front lawn and trees. That's what he was good at. So Doug Ford has taken the coattail of the jacket that was left by Rob Ford and run with it and became Premier of Ontario. But typical authoritarian fashion, Doug Ford got to enrich his friends. But anyways, Based on recent events in April and May of 2026, the Ontario government, led by Mr. Premier Doug Ford, passed an omnibus budget legislation. So what's omnibus? What it is this legislative bill tabled by the legislation, but it covers a mishmash of everything. It's kind of like, you got bangers mash, you got gravy, you got onions, and you got all sorts of things and other carte blanche things to add to it. So they do this so they can ram stuff through that the public's not aware of. This is how an omnibus bill is set up. So Bill 97, passed in April 2026, it's now May 2026, retroactively exempts the records of the Premier and his cabinet ministers and parliamentary assistants to the Freedom of Information requests. So they're hiding the records now. They're under criminal investigation by the RCMP or the OPP, either or. But they're under criminal investigation. Premier Doug Ford et al. And now they passed a bill to hide their records. You gotta love government, eh? Aren't they upfront and transparent with the electorate? No. Here's a guy that wants to take away bike lanes, and then he wants to say, well, I'm going to take away speed cameras on a municipal level. He'll do advertisements. He'll spend many thousands of dollars, up to 100,000 or more, in advertisements to say how much he's saving Ontarians because they're eliminating speed cameras, but yet they're going to create these roundabouts and all these other things that, speed cameras are just a one-and-done thing. Roundabouts take a lot of work and a lot of planning. So anyways, now targeting records, critics and media reports indicate the law was fast-tracked to shield the Premier's phone records, which were the subject of a pending court order regarding the Greenbelt scandal. Late-night passage, late-night debates, which opposition leaders described as undemocratic, democratic, and into the dark of the night. So opposition to changes, 77% of decided Ontarians reject this attempt to change the Freedom of Information Act. But yet, they changed the Freedom of Information. Privacy Commissioner warning, Ontario's Information and Privacy Commissioner, Patricia, warned that these changes would make Ontario less transparent than any other Canadian jurisdiction. Full stop. So while the changes focus on reducing transparency and accountability, can you imagine that? Conservatives say we're the party of accountability. We're the party of fiscal restraint. Now, they're reducing transparency and accountability. There's no direct evidence that the two laws specifically enable superseding elections. But then the other controversial measure is how they encroach upon the rights of the municipalities. So now, standard public hearings, there's limited public participation in the legislative process, and preventing legal challenges related to specific redevelopment projects. Plus now, they've got the ability to take over municipalities, and it just gets messier than that. We'll move on to the next thing. Okay, take it away, guys.
Leslie, you know Ford better than we do because you worked Queen's Park as a reporter. We have just indulged in 10 minutes of necessary sanity ranting. Where are you with all of this? Are we overstating the moment, or, is this cumulative shit getting really out of control?
Did you see how testy Doug Ford got when Tina and Colin just followed each other up on this one? She said, well, taxpayers are also concerned about how their money's being spent. And Colin came in with, and you could settle this right away. Just release the damn documents. Give us the receipts on the plane. Show up if there were brokerage fees or not. And if you notice, he was up against the caucus door. This wasn't a planned media bill. He was scrummed. He was nailed up against the caucus door, and he was pissed off. Why? Because it is affecting him. It's hurting him personally. Because we're moving forward. That plane and the green belts. We're moving forward when people are concerned about the economy. Yeah, well, there can be two things too at the same time, and people are still very concerned about the green belt and the FOI and all that shutting it down. But the story, and you've already mentioned the Trillium, and what they came out with on the air rights story, and bear with me for a second because I'll try and set the stage because this is so bizarre a thing to begin with. We're talking about the air rights above some rail lands in downtown Toronto. And anyone who's ever taken a GO train or a train into Union Station knows all those tracks that are there. Yeah. The air rights that start 27 feet above that level and go up a certain height. This company was formed by two other companies, and they wanted to bid on these air rights. And they bid $79 million or $80 million for these air rights. And the company, of course, one of the two companies involved is a fellow who also happens to be the CEO of Ontario Place and the CEO of the LCBO, a Premier Ford friend who he sat at the Premier's table at one of the Premier's daughter's wedding. So this guy is tight. So they sued the government because, again, how this lawsuit even got off the ground when they never actually followed through on the sale. They never completed the sale of these air rights. And yet they launched a $500 million, $500 million lawsuit against the government. And God forbid I'm in the position of agreeing with Metrolinx. It would have been impossible to build above those, like where they're talking, just there was no case to be had there. But somehow the Trillium digging into this found out that, oh, there had been a settlement. And no, we can't tell you taxpayers how much you paid to this corporation that was, so tight with another one of the Premier's friends. And by the way, so was the CEO of Metrolinx. But that's a whole other. But so it's one of the Premier's friends suing another of the Premier's friends, and with our money, they're playing with our money. And where did they come up with $500 million to sue on? Where did that figure come from? Some inflated real estate thing. Well, they were going to build condos above there. Again, couldn't physically be.
So just to put things in perspective here, folks, put things in perspective. Yeah, put things in perspective. Donald Trump was suing the Treasury of the United States for $10 billion because his tax information got leaked. Meanwhile, one of the conditions of being a president is you disclose your tax filings. But he wouldn't. The only president that hadn't disclosed his tax filings. And with the breach of the disclosure of his tax filings, turns out he only paid $743 or thereabouts in tax, claims to be a billionaire, pays less tax than a school teacher in Wisconsin, and then he's going to sue the Treasury for $10 billion. They do a lawsuit, and fortunately they got a justice that really wasn't paid off by Maga that actually deals with law, and they said, well, how do you have a case here? Well, why does the Treasury want to give you $10 billion? They're not aggrieved because Discovery doesn't show they're an aggrieved participator in this lawsuit. So they have to go back to the drawing board and restructure how they're going to try and take $10 billion out of the Treasury of the United States of America to put into the pocket of a guy by the name of Donald Trump. And that's the reality. Let's go back to what these people are saying here and tie this in.
Done. This is just insanity. And yet we're told as taxpayers that we don't have a right to find out how much of our money is being paid to this company that, again, never actually owned the air rights. They were going to purchase them. So it's just insanity. And Metrolinx, of course, being the big provincial transit agency that has, I think my last check was 124 vice presidents. So I'm not a big defender of Metrolinx, but in this case, this is a screw. What the hell? And Metrolinx has to disclose. They say contractually they can't. Well, yes, you can. This is taxpayers' money. We demand and need to know. And it's just the latest thing that, again, Ford and his spending, and it just this refusing to show the receipts for the gravy plane. I mean, come on, this is not going to. You may have wanted to move on. We're not moving on yet. Do we see some receipts?
Yeah, I think the political grifter era that we're in right now is the gravy plane really exposed it because it was a tangible thing. It had extensive media coverage, and got people talking. And the height of like gas prices at high costs and food and juxtaposing that with this sort of like idea that the premier needs to be shuttled around the province in a $25 million private plane. There's
$29.4 million to be exact, folks.
there's no getting out from under that. I think and so I think what we're going to see now is a government that's just going to do as much for their friends as they can do on the way out. And so you're going to see, and they're not going to be accountable for it. They're not going to explain why they're doing it. They are going to rape the treasury as best as they can and transfer wealth to their friends, knowing that they are in trouble as a political party. But we still have like 4 years left or 3 years left of these guys, right? So there's a lot of damage that they can do. And I think it's like you look at what's happening in the States. So when Ford accuses Stiles of being Trump-like, I mean, there is nobody that's more Trump-like than Doug Ford in the style of politics, in how he's, basically setting the province up to fail economically. He's rewarding his friends. He's making sure that everybody gets away with big bags of money when on the way out. And the people are getting wise to it, but there's not much we can do right now to force an election. So I guess the question is like, how you got to hold their feet to the fire. We got to, donate and help work with the other parties. Like, people need to get engaged, start knocking on doors, do all the things you need to do. Don't, get.
But here's the thing, folks. The 905, which is greatly influenced by this Pierre Poilievre rhetoric and Doug Ford, put this guy Doug Ford back into a position because he said he needed to have a majority government and a new mandate to deal with Donald Trump in the States. Meanwhile, you see him as acting more like Trump every moment of every day. So now let's move to the next guy. Who's the next guy? The leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre. So bear with me. We're going to go to the next screen. Fasten your seatbelts, folks. Okay, but before we move to Pierre Poilievre and his MP, let's look at former trade negotiator of the free trade deal. And he's got an opinion on things, and I think it's important you hear this.
Well, at this point, I am not entirely convinced anything is going to come out of the Kuzma review, at least in the foreseeable future or the short term. I think that positions are still too far apart. The U.S. is looking for Canada to make concessions on some sensitive issues, and Canada is looking to see the U.S. move on big issues, steel, aluminum, and autos, breaches of the agreement that we already have. I don't think the Mexican-U.S. discussions are really getting quite as far as some are saying, and I think they're in a similar position. I think that we could get to a better space once we start talking about trilateral issues, because I think there is some more common ground there with respect to how we deal with the North American market as a region. And I think that for the moment, we have the Kuzma exemption still in place. So a higher proportion of goods are trading duty-free into the U.S. That's taking a lot of heat off of all three countries. It's making it a bit less of a crisis. So that too doesn't put pressure on for a fast result. Canada can't force the U.S. to a conclusion or force the U.S. even to an end game. I think that over time, some of those pressures may begin to wane a bit as I think the U.S. extremes of their tariff policy will start to moderate to some degree. And then that will be the real challenge for us, maintaining the urgency in the face of that, because the U.S. is always going to be the easiest market. They're right next door.
But here's the thing you have to remember, folks. Kuzma, it's just coming up for review. We don't have to renegotiate this deal. It's coming up for review. And this is written into the agreement. So the deal is going to stay in place. There is a 6-month notice period that's written into the deal. So if any party wants to walk away from the deal, they have to give 6 months notice. The review process here, the United States is dragging their feet. They're using whatever to state, we want these preconditions met before we discuss the review, but we don't have to. And the fact of the matter is the United States has not started negotiations. we're working with Mexico right now to negotiate with Mexico for this agreement. So either way, we're going to have an agreement with Mexico no matter what. But Cosma, people seem to think we're dragging our feet. Carney's dragging his feet because, no, this is just a review. And unless the United States gives notice of 6 months ending their participation in Cosma, the deal will keep going on as it's written. But as you've noticed with this former negotiator, the United States has already breached tariffs for steel and aluminum, and this is a big issue, and it's affecting Canada. And the thing is, under this administration with Trump, he just wants a zero-sum game where he's the winner and everybody else is a loser. Any other agreement with any other country around the world, when they make him unhappy, when Trump is unhappy, anything they've signed, which still includes a standard tariff fee, he just won't honor. And this is what we're dealing with right now with this Trump administration. So I'm going to go to an MP of Pierre Poilievre next. Sit tight. Don't go away, folks. So here we have conservative MP at a conservative political Canada. It's called Canada Strong and Free Networking Conference in Ottawa. And just yesterday they had Mike Pompeo and Conservative MP Shivaloi Majumdar is interviewing Mike Pompeo. Pompeo is from the first administration under Trump. He was Secretary of State. He had Marco Rubio's job. And one of the most notable things that Mike Pompeo did when he was Secretary of State was claim that Trump was the chosen one from God. It really happened, folks. Doesn't get any better than that. So anyways, let's see. Anyway, let's see what these people have to say.
Tattoos, clearly.
Yeah, no tattoos yet. Exactly. The nose ring is missing as well. But the only one of them that can actually change the way we live is the Chinese Communist Party under Xi Jinping. That can actually change the very nature of the countries that we all love so much. So what do you do about that? So you have these deep supply chain commercial ties. We're not gonna decouple. It's neither practical nor do I think, frankly, it's in anyone's best interest. If they want to make beach balls and sell them at Walmart in America, knock yourself out. But when it comes to anything that is remotely related to technology and security, we should be, and I would include pharmaceuticals, biochem stuff. When you start to talk about the things that really are civilizationally important, we should make sure that we're making them in friendly places. So whether it's America or Canada or even our friends in India, right, partner places, South Korea, we should have friends that have enough of that resource and capability that we never find ourselves in a place where we did during COVID, where we just didn't have stuff that we needed. So that'd be step one. Step two, when we talk about China, we talk about Taiwan a lot. Like, are they going to invade Taiwan? Practical matter. I don't think that they will, but I'm very worried that that doesn't matter because they'll take it over through political force, right? Through winning an election. And so when I think about that, we have to do the hard work to use our peace through strength model to deter them from doing that. But I'm much less worried about Taiwan than I am about Denver, Colorado, or Los Angeles, or Phoenix, or Ottawa, or Toronto. The Chinese Communist Party is hard at work inside the gates here, right where we're sitting today. I'll bet, can't see very much out there, but I will bet you that there are Chinese Communist Party affiliated people in this room today. And by the way, they look like me, like they're white Italian dudes, right?
Meanwhile, it's okay for Trump to be with Putin, cozy up to Putin, allow Putin propaganda to be distributed through the Midwest of the United States, also through Alberta. And then it's okay for Putin to deal with the Iranians and help the Iranians when Trump's at war with the Iranians. So you got to understand, what is the madness of the United States of America? First of all, number one, they feel China is a threat. Well, they created the problem with China. And what you have to look at China, they created a hybrid economy, which allowed them to grow at a a rate of 5.8% since the end of the Second World War, and given another 10 years, would be 60 times more 60 times more powerful financially than the United States. Meanwhile, the United States doesn't recognize they created the problem. And how'd they create the problem? Well, they're corporations. The corporations in the United States, and this is where we have a problem with free markets, Canada, United States, conservative parties, they pander to the corporations. They figure free markets, we got to have limited government and free markets. Look at what free markets have done. In order for the corporations to pay dividends to their shareholders, they outsourced all their manufacturing, basically to China, to create the rentier class. People just sitting on their couch collecting this income. And then when they find out that China is becoming much more powerful force in the world, they say, whoa, we've been taken advantage of, and we need to change that relationship. This is how we got these tariffs against everybody in the world, except for against Russia, believe it or not. Russia's allowed to do what they want. And why? Because as I told you, this guy Trump has been helped by the Russians financially, because nobody else would help the guy, because, you know, he's a bankrupt king. He's the king of bankruptcy. Nobody goes through cash like Trump does. Talks big. He's a salesman, but he doesn't deliver anything. He just bankrupts things. Just ruins things. He turns gold into gold and lines his pockets with it, and he takes care of himself. But he doesn't care about anybody else. He doesn't care about any other country in the world. And we've seen that. Mike Pompeo here, once you're a Republican, Mick Mulvaney, I'll never vote for Trump, but guess what? He voted for Trump. John Bolton, I'll never vote Democrat. Meanwhile, all his records at home get seized, he gets charged. He still stands behind the Republican Party. So this is where we're at. Now they make China, you got to understand China. I'm going to do a separate thing on this guy Jiang, which is a popular guy all of a sudden on the circuit of the internet, was recently on the CEO Diary podcast, who was actually used to live in Toronto, Canada, Chinatown community I know very well. But for some reason, he's able to broadcast from Beijing behind the China wall out to the Western world. So you got to question what's going on there. And he's not a professor, believe it or not. They call him professor, but he's not a professor. Let's go back to Mike Pompeo here now.
But they're working for this mission set, and they're not spies in the quintessential sense. They're in our university systems. In the United States, there is not a single university in the United States that isn't deeply tied to Chinese money. Chinese students in our country, they pay full student tuition, and then they come give money to our labs so that they can, steal our stuff. They are inside the gates in ways that I think we have we've been very naive about this risk and what that means to us. And so we should adopt a model that is on the inside the gates problem. We should adopt a model that's really simple. Reciprocity. You want to buy farmland near Fort Riley, Kansas. We'd like to buy some land near your military facility in Western China. Good luck, right? It's not going to happen. And yet we somehow just missed the mark here. And you want to go study at a Chinese university, you can probably do that if you want to study like science or art or literature. But if you want to study hyperscaling physics, then they're smarter than that. And they don't let that happen. And we all in the West have let that happen. The last thing to say is, and I alluded to this is best told by example about how deep they are and the scale of it. When I was the CIA director, I learned of an espionage operation being conducted against the United States. It was being conducted out of the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas, of all places. It was, best I could tell, the largest spying operation ever conducted inside the United States that we're aware of. And we'd allowed it to go on for years because we were afraid that if we shut it down, they would do something bad to us, right? It was this fear of escalation, if you will, diplomatic in that sense, escalation. So the State Department always was against it. The good news was I became Secretary of State. And it's not a state. So myself and Director Wray of the FBI spent 4.5 months putting together an operation. We closed the Chinese consulate in Houston, Texas, which is a great story, just in how it came about. So I invited the Chinese ambassador in. My team's like, oh, you can't meet with him. Like, secretaries don't meet with ambassadors, right? I'm like, no, I got this one. Like, you only get so much fun in life. Told them they were spying and they had to be out in 72 hours. Within less than an hour, the entire consulate was on fire. They were burning everything there. And within 2 days, we had identified hundreds of Chinese agents operating in the United States, most of which we were unaware of. They started getting tickets to fly out, right? You could just see the network light up, and not me, but our internal security folks, the FBI mostly, did really remarkable work. And I remember meeting with Director Wray shortly thereafter. We were pretty proud of ourselves for having pulled this off. And then, we took a breath and oh my gosh, what do we still not know? And I would be very mindful, as many of you are in the business world, they are inside your companies. They're trying to get inside your security systems. This is a full-on effort to undermine Western civilization. It's not just about stealing intellectual property. It's about shaping the minds of Canadians. And as we sit here, many of you are young.
But it's all right to shape the minds of Americans with Russian propaganda. You have a meeting in Alaska with Putin, you pull out the red carpet. Trump's not sure about something. Just the other day, he was going to Helicopter One. Oh, he's got a meeting. He's got to talk to Putin. He needs advice from Putin. You really got to question what's going on there, folks. And I think the Han dynasty, which Xi Jinping's got his own problems politically because he crossed the red line with his own military, which Communist Party leaders don't do, but he did. So now he's got problems in China. Don't be surprised if there is political change in China. The Han dynasty, which was stronger than Mao ever was, which actually has done a lot of good things to create development in China for the people. And you have to witness it to actually understand it. But nonetheless, you have to keep them and dealing with China in a situation where it's measured and controlled and for obvious reasons. And Carney understands that and has been dealing with that in that appropriate manner because of the Xi Jinping and the Han dynasty. They've done things that the leaders, the prefaced, prefaced Xi Jinping haven't done. So this is where we're at. And we're going to move, I just want to see the Calgary member of parliament, Conservative Parliament, his reaction to this, and you should see it as well. Let's see.
If you have on your phone, or your children and grandchildren have on your phone, basically the Chinese Communist Party message. They're telling your kids things and you can't disintermediate it. And they're telling them Canada sucks, and you people are decadent, and the West is in decline, and if Canada's bad, America...
Yeah, but here's the other thing, and this is what I've got to bring to your attention too. Larry Ellison of Oracle now owns most of the media in the United States. And so you can't say a bad thing about Trump. He's pro-Trump, pro-Republican, and that's why you've got guys like comedians being taken off the air and the narrative being whitewashed with news now. Pierre Poilievre would like to do that in Canada. He did threaten CTV, because CTV is owned by a corporation, Bell Canada, but that's another discussion. Let's go back to this video.
It's really bad. Be very mindful that they are working very hard to shape the next generation to undermine the things that we care most about. So if you said, Mike, what do you do? I would start in our schools and with parents, making sure they understood this Chinese global campaign to convince us that, your point was earlier, that we're the evil actors, and we can never let that happen.
Well said.
There you go. Well said. He had to say it. He could not say it because, CCP, Conservative Party of Canada, CPC, do their fear-mongering as well. And they do that on purpose. Now let's move to Pierre Poilievre, and we're going to move to another screen here. Okay, folks, so here we have Pierre Poilievre at this same networking conservative platform. It's got MAGA people there. Meanwhile, what's going on in Alberta? This guy has a seat in Alberta. He's not mentioning anything about Russia infiltrating. They mention Chinese, take away from the Russian narrative. But what are you going to do? Let's see what this man has to say.
Carney has doubled Trudeau's deficit, and outside of COVID, he has the biggest deficit in Canadian history and the highest spending as a share of GDP since 1996. He has not eliminated the carbon tax. He's given it a new name, the Clean Fuel Standard, all while forcing our industry to pay the only industrial carbon tax of any oil-producing country, a tax that Enbridge and Cenovus both say will make it impossible to produce enough oil to ever go in a future Pacific pipeline.
Meanwhile, you got a pipeline just revived, partially revived. Used to be Keystone. It's modified. But guess what? Enbridge has got a stake in that. Plus Bowater has a stake in that. The only thing they're going to invest, because it's the only thing that makes sense, because the oil that goes from Alberta to the United States, 60% of it is processed and repackaged and resent out to the export market for a huge profit by the U.S. So don't think they're doing it for free, folks. The U.S. is capitalizing on Alberta big time. Now, my other point is, you've seen where Pierre Poilievre here is. All he's doing is being the critic. Guy's a good critic. But what he's criticizing, he has no policies to actually replace the policies of the Liberal government position now that are working well. The only policies Mr. Poilievre knows are economic policies that hurt Canadians. And a lot of people don't understand how that works because they don't understand the economics of things and how money is created by a sovereign nation. And here's the juxtaposition. If Mr. Poilievre had his way, the deficit would be smaller. So if the deficit is smaller, the energy, which is money is energy also, that creates programs and recreates a new framework, how we do business in Canada, all you're doing is putting a noose around the financial necks of every Canadian by decreasing the money that's going into Canada to help create a new Canada. And this is what you need to understand. This cut. You're just going to cut everything you're trying to do. It takes energy, and money is also energy, to restructure your economy so that you're less dependent on the Americans. Someday the Americans are going to wake up and say, listen, we miss our Canadian cousins. We'd like to do business with them. And until that day, we've got to take care of ourselves. So that's my point. Sending love and peace to everyone. You can get out of this pain and suffering. This cut doesn't work. This authoritarianism that's crept into Alberta for a long time. Got to understand, back in the 1970s, you had a national energy program by a Liberal government that would have meant that we had energy independence by now, but it got killed. It got nixed by who? A Conservative government. Same as the Avro-Arrow project under the Pearson government. All the scientists from that project got terminated by a guy, Conservative by the name of Diefenbaker. And all those scientists went down to the United States, and guess what? They created NASA, landed people on the moon. Whether you believe in the moon landing or not, NASA was created from the AV Row company that made the Avro-Arrow in Canada, and that's what you have to realize. So you have to understand Canada needs a new direction. We need to do things differently. It's working under Mark Carney. Is it perfect? From my point of view, no. It needs work, but it's coming along. He's at least open to feedback and changing. But because of the rhetoric by the Conservative cut, fall into that cut trap, you're going to cut off the branch of the tree that you're sitting on. And you know where that's going to go. So get away from this pain and suffering thinking, this thinking of lack, move into a position of benevolence, harmony, and abundance. Start by being kind to yourself and your neighbors. Love and peace to everyone. Take care. Talk to you all soon. Ciao for now.